The old car pulled up outside the martial arts academy with a nervous screech of brakes. 12-year-old twins Alex and Jordan sat in the back seat, staring at the big glass windows of the building. Through those windows, they could see kids and teenagers in white uniforms moving around, kicking and punching the air with serious faces. "You sure about this, Mom?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His twin sister Jordan just nodded along, both of them looking like they wanted to sink into the car seats and disappear. Their mother turned around from the front seat with that encouraging smile parents use when they're trying to convince their kids that scary things aren't actually scary. "Listen, you two have been dealing with those bullies at school for months now. This will help you feel more confident about yourselves." The twins had been having a rough time lately. Kids at their new middle school seemed to think picking on Ray to them was some kind of fun game. Alex was quiet and loved reading, which somehow made him a target. Jordan was small for her age and wore glasses, which apparently gave other kids permission to be mean. Their mom thought karate might teach them to stand up for themselves. Walking through the front door felt like entering a different world. The place smelled like cleaning supplies and sweat. There were mirrors everywhere, making the room look twice as big as it actually was. Kids in white uniforms were practicing moves that looked like they came straight out of action movies. Some were doing slow, dance-like movements, while others were hitting thick padded bags that made loud thudding sounds. The twins stuck close together, feeling very out of place in their regular clothes. Everyone else seemed to know exactly what they were doing, moving with confidence and purpose. Alex and Jordan just stood there, wondering if they had made a huge mistake. "You must be the new students," said a man with a kind voice. He was wearing a black uniform with a thick black belt around his waist. "I'm Mr. Chen, the instructor here. Welcome to our dojo." Mr. Chen seemed nice enough, but the twins were too nervous to do much more than nod and mumble their names. He handed them each a white uniform that looked way too big and pointed them toward the changing rooms. When they came back out, stumbling a bit in their oversized uniforms, the real intimidation began. 3 teenagers, all wearing black belts, were standing near the practice area. They looked the twins up and down like they were inspecting something they found on the bottom of their shoes. The first black belt was a tall, muscular kid who looked like he could bench press a car. His arms were crossed and he had this smug expression that said he thought he was better than everyone else. The second was shorter but built like a tank, with shoulders that seemed too wide for doorways. The third was a girl with her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her eyes were cold as ice. "Great, more beginners," the tall one said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Hope they last longer than the last bunch who quit after 2 weeks." The stocky one laughed. "Remember that kid who cried during his first sparring session? That was hilarious." The girl just shook her head. "Some people think they can just walk in here and become martial artists overnight. Takes years to earn respect in this place." Alex felt his face getting hot. Jordan grabbed his arm, sensing her brother was about to say something they'd both regret. They could hear other students nearby starting to pay attention to the conversation, which made everything worse. Mr. Chen called everyone to line up for the beginning of class. The twins found themselves at the back of the group, which was fine with them. They wanted to blend into the background and figure out what they were supposed to be doing. The warm-up was brutal. They had to do jumping jacks, push-ups, and stretches that made muscles they didn't know they had start screaming. Alex was breathing hard after just 5 minutes while Jordan's glasses kept sliding down her sweaty nose. The 3 black belts, meanwhile, were going through the exercises like they were taking a casual stroll through the park. "Keep up, newbies," the tall black belt called out during jumping jacks. "This is just the easy part." When they moved on to basic techniques, things got even more embarrassing. Mr. Chen showed them how to do a simple front kick, making it look effortless and smooth. When Alex tried it, he nearly fell over backwards. Jordan's kicks barely reached knee height, and she looked like she was trying to stomp on invisible bugs. The black belts watched with barely hidden amusement. They whispered to each other and pointed, not caring that their comments were loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at them trying to kick," the stocky one said with a snort. "My little sister could do better than that, and she's 7. The girl rolled her eyes dramatically every time Mr. Chen had to correct the twins' form, which was pretty much constantly. She made exaggerated sighing sounds whenever the instructor spent extra time helping them understand a technique. During partner practice, things got worse. Mr. Chen paired Alex with another beginner, which should have been helpful. But the tall black belt kept walking by and making helpful suggestions that were really just thinly disguised insults. "You might want to actually use your hips when you punch," he said to Alex. "I mean, if you want the technique to actually work instead of looking like you're swatting flies." Jordan got paired with a more experienced student who was actually trying to help, but the girl black belt kept interrupting with corrections that weren't really corrections at all. "No, no, no," she'd say, stepping in. "Your stance is all wrong. Are you even trying? This is basic stuff that white belts should know." The worst part was that other students were starting to watch the drama unfold. Some looked sympathetic, but others seemed entertained by the show. The twins felt like they were under a microscope, with everyone waiting to see how they'd handle the pressure. By the time class ended, Alex and Jordan were exhausted, embarrassed, and ready to never come back. They'd barely learned anything because they'd spent most of the time feeling self-conscious and intimidated. Their uniforms were soaked with sweat, and their confidence was at rock bottom. As they were gathering their things to leave, the tall, black belt approached them with a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, good first class," he said in a tone that dripped with false encouragement. "Listen, I've been training here for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of people come and go. Karate isn't for everyone, you know. Maybe you'd be happier trying something else. Basketball, track, maybe swimming. Those might be more your speed." The stocky black belt nodded along. "Yeah, martial arts require a certain type of person. Someone with natural athleticism and fighting spirit. It's not something you can just pick up if you don't have it," the girl added her own poisonous comment. "We're just trying to save you from wasting your time and money. Some people are cut out for this and others aren't. Nothing wrong with knowing your limitations." Alex felt his hands clench into fists, but Jordan grabbed his arm again. They both knew getting into an argument wouldn't help anything. Instead, they just nodded politely and headed for the door. Walking back to their mom's car, they felt defeated. The bullies at school were bad enough, but at least they'd hoped the karate class would be different. Instead, they'd found a whole new group of people ready to make them feel small and worthless. But as they reached the car, something strange happened. Instead of feeling like giving up completely, they both felt a tiny spark of anger. Not the kind of anger that makes you want to hurt someone, but the kind that makes you want to prove people wrong. "We're coming back next week," Jordan said quietly as they got in the car. Alex looked at his sister with surprise, then slowly nodded. "Yeah, we are." Their mom asked how it went, and they told her it was fine. They didn't mention the black belts, or the comments, or how embarrassed they'd felt. They just said they wanted to keep trying. That night, Alex looked up karate videos online while Jordan practiced the kicks they'd learned in their bedroom. Neither of them said it out loud, but they were both thinking the same thing. Those black belts had no idea what they were dealing with. The second week at the dojo started exactly like the first one, except now the 3 black belts knew the twins were coming back. Alex and Jordan could see the surprise on their faces when they walked through the door in their white uniforms. The tall black belt nudged his friends and whispered something that made them all smirk. "Well, look who decided to show up again," the stocky one said loud enough for half the class to hear. "Guess they didn't take our advice." The girl black belt just shook her head like she was disappointed in their life choices. "Some people never learn," she muttered. But Alex and Jordan had spent the whole week thinking about that first class. They'd watched karate videos online, practiced basic moves in their garage, and talked about how they weren't going to let 3 bullies ruin something they wanted to try. They'd dealt with bullies at school, and now they had to deal with bullies at karate class too. The difference was, this time they'd paid money to be here. The intimidation started during warm-ups. When they were doing stretches, the tall, black belt positioned himself right behind Alex and started making comments about his flexibility. "Wow, can't even touch your toes? That's going to be a problem for kicks. Maybe you should try yoga first, work on the basics." During jumping jacks, the stocky one kept counting out loud in a mocking voice. 1, 2, 3. "Oh wait, are you getting tired already? We've got 40 more to go." The girl black belt found different ways to make Jordan feel unwelcome. When they were doing push-ups, she'd do hers right next to Jordan, making it obvious how much stronger and faster she was. Every time Jordan struggled, she'd make these dramatic sighing sounds like Jordan was personally ruining her workout. The worst part was how they made everything seem accidental. When they lined up for techniques practice, the tall black belt would somehow always end up standing right behind Alex, breathing down his neck and making him nervous. If Alex messed up a move, he'd lean forward and whisper helpful tips that were really just ways to point out mistakes. "You're telegraphing. That punch from next week," he'd say. "Maybe slow down and think about what you're doing instead of just throwing your arms around." During partner drills, things got really uncomfortable. Mr. Chen would pair students up for practice, and somehow the three black belts always managed to get partnered with Alex and Jordan. They claimed they were being helpful by working with beginners, but their idea of help involved being way too rough. When Alex was supposed to practice blocking techniques with the stocky black belt, each light contact strike felt like getting hit with a baseball bat. The black belt would apologize immediately, saying things like, "Sorry, still getting used to working with beginners. You'll develop better timing eventually." Jordan had it even worse with the girl black belt. During grappling practice, she'd apply joint locks just a little too tight, hold them just a little too long, and then act surprised when Jordan winced in pain. "Oh, did that hurt? You need to speak up if something's uncomfortable. We're all friends. Here, just trying to help you learn." The psychological games were just as bad as the physical ones. The three black belts developed a system of communication that involved a lot of eye rolling, head shaking, and meaningful looks whenever the twins were practicing. They'd time how long it took Alex and Jordan to learn new techniques and then announce their results to anyone who'd listen. "Took them 12 tries to get that basic block right," the tall one would say. "Most people pick it up in 3 or 4. They started calling Alex and Jordan the project kids, like they were some kind of charity case that the dojo had taken on. They'd introduce them to other students as the ones we're trying to help, which made every interaction awkward and embarrassing. The mind games extended beyond just training time. They'd show up early to class and be warming up when Alex and Jordan arrived, making it clear they were more dedicated. They'd stay late after class, practicing advanced techniques that the twins couldn't even begin to understand, making sure to do it right where everyone could see. During water breaks, they'd gather other students around and talk about tournament victories, belt testing successes, and advanced training seminars. They'd make sure to speak just loud enough for Alex and Jordan to overhear, creating this sense that there was an inner circle of real martial artists. And then there were the wannabes. The social isolation was brutal. Other students started keeping their distance from the twins, not because they disliked them, but because associating with them seemed to mark you as a beginner too. The three black belts had created this atmosphere where being seen as too friendly with Alex and Jordan might hurt your own reputation in the dojo. Alex started having trouble sleeping. He'd lie in bed replaying embarrassing moments from class, thinking about all the ways he'd messed up. He'd imagine himself getting better, getting stronger, showing those black belts what he was really capable of. But then he'd remember how helpless he felt during actual class and wonder if maybe they were right about him not being cut out for martial arts. Jordan dealt with it differently. She got quiet and withdrawn, which was unusual for her. At home, she'd practice moves over and over again in front of the mirror, trying to perfect her form so she wouldn't give the black belts anything to criticize. She'd watch the same instructional videos repeatedly, taking notes and trying to memorize every detail. Their mom started noticing changes in their behavior. They'd come home from karate class looking defeated instead of energized. They stopped talking about what they'd learned and started making excuses for why they couldn't practice at home. "Maybe this isn't the right place for you," she suggested one evening after a particularly rough class. There are other martial arts schools in town, but both twins immediately protested. Something inside them refused to give up, refused to let the three black belts win. It wasn't just about karate anymore. It was about proving to themselves that they didn't have to run away every time someone tried to make them feel small. The breaking point came during the 4th week. Mr. Chen had introduced a new technique, a combination punch and kick that required coordination and timing. Alex was struggling with it, like most beginners would, but he was making progress. Each attempt was getting a little better, a little smoother. The tall black belt was watching and decided to offer some encouragement. "You know what your problem is," he said, speaking loud enough for the whole class to hear. "You're thinking too much. Martial arts is about instinct, about natural ability. Some people have it, some people don't. You can't think your way into being a fighter." That comment hit Alex harder than any of the physical contact during sparring. It wasn't just criticism of his technique. It was an attack on who he was as a person. Alex was someone who solved problems by thinking them through, by understanding how things worked. Being told that his greatest strength was actually a weakness in martial arts felt like being told he'd never belong here. Jordan saw the hurt in her brother's eyes and felt her own anger building. She watched the girl black belt nod along with the tall one's comment, watched the stocky one chuckle like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. She saw other students looking uncomfortable but not saying anything to defend her brother. That night, for the first time since starting karate classes, the twins talked honestly about what was happening. They admitted how much the intimidation was affecting them, how close they'd both come to quitting, how frustrated they felt about not being able to prove themselves. But they also talked about something else. They talked about the fact that they'd been holding back, trying to fit in, trying not to draw attention to themselves. They'd been so focused on learning traditional karate that they'd forgotten about all the other things they already knew how to do. "We've been playing their game," Jordan said quietly. "Maybe it's time to play our own." Alex nodded, feeling something shift inside him. They'd spent weeks being victims, weeks letting 3 bullies make them feel worthless. But they weren't victims, and they definitely weren't helpless. They just hadn't shown anyone what they were really capable of yet. The 5th week at the dojo started differently. Alex and Jordan walked through the doors with something new in their eyes, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. The 3 black belts noticed it immediately, but couldn't quite figure out what had changed. What they didn't know was that the twins had spent the weekend having a long conversation with their parents about their family history. It turned out their mom and dad had been keeping some pretty big secrets about their own backgrounds. Their grandfather, who had passed away when they were little, wasn't just any regular grandpa. He'd been a Golden Gloves boxing champion back in his day, with quick hands and footwork that made him legendary in local fighting circles. Their dad had learned everything from him before deciding to focus on college instead of pursuing professional fighting. Their mom dropped an even bigger bombshell. She'd been a competitive gymnast through high school and college, which explained where Jordan got her natural flexibility and balance. She'd also done some kickboxing training to stay in shape, something she'd never mentioned to her kids. But the biggest revelation was that both parents had been secretly training the twins since they were 6 years old. What the kids thought were just fun games in the backyard had actually been boxing and wrestling lessons. All those times their dad taught them how to play fight safely, he'd been teaching them real techniques. Their mom's stretching games had been building their flexibility and body awareness. The twins had also been doing something else their parents didn't know about. For the past 2 years, they'd been watching parkour videos online and practicing in their neighborhood. They'd learned how to move efficiently, how to fall safely, and how to use their environment to their advantage. They thought it was just for fun, but they'd actually been developing skills that most martial artists never learn. All of this came flooding back to them as they prepared for what they knew would be another difficult class. The 3 black belts were already warming up, shooting them looks that promised more of the same treatment they'd been getting for weeks. Class started with the usual warm-up routine, but this time Alex and Jordan didn't struggle. Their boxing training had given them cardiovascular endurance that most beginners didn't have. Their gymnastics background made the stretching exercises look easy. The 3 black belts noticed but figured it was just beginner's luck. During technique practice, Mr. Chen introduced a new combination that involved footwork, punching, and blocking. It was complex enough that even some of the more experienced students were having trouble with it. The black belts were watching Alex and Jordan, waiting for them to mess up so they could make their usual comments. But something strange happened. Alex picked up the combination faster than anyone else in the class. His boxing background made the punching mechanics natural, and his wrestling experience gave him the balance and coordination for the footwork. Within 10 minutes, He was performing the combination smoother than students who'd been training for months. Jordan was even more impressive. Her gymnastics training made her movements fluid and graceful, while her parkour experience gave her an understanding of timing and distance that surprised everyone. She wasn't just copying the technique, she was making it her own, adding little improvements that made it more efficient. The three black belts couldn't believe what they were seeing. These were the same hopeless beginners they'd been tormenting for weeks, and now they were outperforming half the class. Must be having a good day, the tall black belt muttered, but his voice lacked the usual confidence. The real test came during sparring practice. Mr. Chen paired students up for light contact practice, emphasizing control and technique over power. The stocky black belt immediately volunteered to work with Alex, figuring this would be a perfect opportunity to put the beginner back in his place. "Don't worry," he said with his usual smirk. "I'll go easy on you. Wouldn't want to hurt the new guy." What happened next shocked everyone in the dojo. The stocky black belt threw a standard karate punch, the kind he'd been using to intimidate Alex for weeks. But this time, Alex wasn't there when the punch arrived. He'd slipped to the side using boxing footwork that was so smooth it looked like he'd teleported. Before the black belt could react, Alex had countered with a combination that came straight from his boxing training. A quick jab to create distance, followed by a hook that stopped just inches from his opponent's jaw. The technique was so fast and precise that several other students stopped their own practice to watch. The stocky black belt tried again, this time with more aggression. He threw a series of punches and kicks, figuring that overwhelming Alex with volume would work. Instead, Alex used his wrestling background to close the distance, get inside the black belt's range, and execute a perfect takedown that left his opponent flat on his back. Where did that come from? The stocky black belt gasped, genuinely shocked. Meanwhile, Jordan was having her own revelation with the girl black belt. For weeks, she'd been subjected to overly aggressive joint locks and painful holds. The girl black belt had been using her superior strength and experience to make Jordan feel helpless. But Jordan's gymnastics training had given her something most martial artists never develop: incredible body awareness and flexibility. When the girl black belt tried to apply her usual painful arm lock, Jordan simply flowed out of it like water, using flexibility and timing instead of strength. "How did you do that?" the girl black belt asked, trying the same technique again. This time, Jordan not only escaped but reversed the position, applying the same lock back on her opponent with technical precision that would have impressed a judo instructor. Her parkour training had taught her how to use momentum and leverage, making her much stronger than her small size suggested. The tall black belt, seeing his two friends struggling, decided to step in and restore order. He approached Alex with the confident swagger of someone who'd never been challenged by a beginner. "Let me show you how it's really done," he said, assuming his usual intimidating stance. What followed was a masterclass in the difference between natural talent and technical skill. The tall black belt had years of traditional karate training, but Alex had something more fundamental: fighting instincts that had been developed through years of different martial arts training. Every technique the tall black belt tried, Alex had an answer for. High kicks were countered with boxing footwork. Punching combinations were met with wrestling clinches. When the tall black belt tried to use his reach advantage, Alex closed the distance and made it a close-range fight where his boxing skills gave him the edge. The most impressive moment came when the tall black belt attempted a flashy jumping kick that was meant to intimidate Alex. Instead of backing away like a typical beginner, Alex stepped forward, caught the kick using techniques he'd learned from wrestling videos, and used the tall black belt's own momentum to take him down. The entire dojo had stopped to watch. Students who'd been practicing their own techniques were now gathered around, witnessing what looked like two advanced martial artists disguised as beginners. Mr. Chen walked over, his expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "Where did you two learn to fight like that?" Alex and Jordan looked at each other, realizing they'd blown their cover. For weeks, they'd been trying to blend in, trying to learn traditional karate without drawing attention to themselves. But their natural instincts and cross-training had finally taken over. "Our family has some background in different martial arts," Jordan said simply. We've been training in various things since we were little. The three black belts were still on the floor, trying to process what had just happened. They'd spent weeks intimidating what they thought were helpless beginners, only to discover they'd been picking on experienced fighters who had been holding back. You mean you've been sandbagging this whole time? The tall black belt asked, using a term that meant deliberately hiding your skill level. Alex shook his head. We weren't trying to fool anyone. We came here to learn karate, not to show off. We've been trying to fit in and learn your style without making waves. The girl black belt sat up, rubbing her shoulder where Jordan had applied the arm lock. But you could have shut us down weeks ago. Why didn't you? Jordan's answer surprised everyone. Because we wanted to learn. We knew if we came in here acting like we already knew everything, we wouldn't learn anything new. We wanted to start from the beginning and build proper karate skills. The stocky black belt looked embarrassed. So you just let us treat you like garbage for weeks? We've dealt with bullies before, Alex said quietly. We know the difference between someone who's trying to help and someone who's trying to hurt. We were hoping you'd eventually realize we weren't a threat and start treating us like teammates instead of enemies. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. The three black belts were starting to understand that they'd been the bullies in this situation, and their victims had been strong enough to fight back the whole time but had chosen not to. Mr. Chen broke the silence. I think we need to have a conversation about what martial arts really means. It's not about intimidating people or proving you're better than beginners. It's about helping each other improve and creating a community where everyone can learn. The week after the big revelation should have been better, but the three black belts were dealing with something they'd never experienced before, complete embarrassment in front of their entire dojo. For years, they'd been the top students, the ones everyone looked up to, the examples of what dedicated martial artists could become. Now everyone knew they'd been outsmarted and outfought by two kids they'd been bullying for weeks. Instead of learning from what happened, they decided to make things worse. Pride is a dangerous thing, especially when it gets wounded in front of people whose respect you've worked years to earn. The three black belts spent the week between classes plotting how they could restore their reputation and put Alex and Jordan back in what they thought was their proper place. They got lucky, the tall black belt kept saying to anyone who'd listen. Caught us off guard with some street fighting moves. That's not real martial arts. The stocky one agreed. Yeah, there's a difference between knowing a few tricks and being a real fighter. We've been training traditional martial arts for years. They just know some basic stuff from other sports. The girl black belt was the most bitter of all. They made us look like fools in front of everyone. We can't let that stand. People are starting to think maybe we're not as good as we claim to be. Their plan was simple and cruel. They would challenge Alex and Jordan to a formal sparring session after regular class hours when most of the other students and Mr. Chen would be gone. They'd make it seem like a friendly training session, but their real goal was to humiliate the twins so completely that they'd never show up to the dojo again. They spent the week preparing. They practiced their most advanced techniques, worked on combinations they'd learned at tournaments, and studied videos of professional fighters to pick up new moves. They were determined to prove that their years of traditional training were superior to whatever mixed-up fighting style the twins had learned. What they didn't realize was that their behavior over the past week had been noticed by everyone in the dojo. Other students had watched them become more aggressive during regular sparring, seen them making snide comments about fake martial artists and show-off beginners, and heard them talking about teaching certain people a lesson. Mr. Chen had noticed too, but he decided to let things play out naturally. He'd been teaching martial arts for 20 years, and he'd seen this kind of situation before. Sometimes students needed to learn lessons that couldn't be taught through regular instruction. Sometimes they needed to face the consequences of their own attitudes. On Friday evening, as the regular class was ending, the tall black belt approached Alex and Jordan with what he thought was a casual suggestion. Hey, a few of us are staying after class to do some extra sparring practice. Want to join us? It'll be good training for you, working with more experienced fighters. The stocky one nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, we could show you some advanced techniques, help you understand what real martial arts training looks like. The girl black belt added her own fake encouragement. It's always good to push yourself beyond your comfort zone. See what you're really made of. Alex and Jordan looked at each other. They'd been around bullies long enough to recognize a setup when they heard one. The three black belts weren't offering friendly training, they were looking for revenge. Their tone was too sweet, their smiles too forced, and their eyes too cold. "Sure," Jordan said simply. "Sounds like fun." Alex nodded along. "We're always interested in learning more." As the regular students filed out of the dojo, a few lingered near the entrance. Word had somehow gotten around about the after-hours session, and several people wanted to see what would happen. Even some of the advanced students who usually left immediately after class found reasons to stick around. Mr. Chen made a show of packing up his equipment and heading toward his office, but he left the door slightly open where he could observe what was happening. He had a feeling things were about to get very interesting. The sparring area was cleared and the 6 teenagers faced each other. The 3 black belts had arranged themselves in a semicircle, like they were preparing for some kind of formal challenge. Their body language was aggressive and confident, the look of predators who thought they'd cornered easy prey. "Let's start with some light sparring," the tall black belt said, but his definition of light was very different from everyone else's. "Alex, why don't you work with me first? Show everyone what you learned last week." What followed wasn't sparring at all. It was a systematic attempt to break down everything Alex had shown the week before. The tall black belt came at him with years of pent-up frustration, using every advanced technique he'd ever learned. His kicks were faster and more complex than anything he'd shown in regular class. His punching combinations were designed to overwhelm and confuse. His footwork was meant to cut off escape routes and trap Alex in corners. But Alex had something the tall black belt didn't expect: real fighting experience that went far beyond what he'd shown the previous week. His boxing training hadn't just been casual lessons with his dad. He'd been sparring with adults since he was 8 years old, learning how to handle opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more aggressive than him. Every technique the tall black belt threw, Alex had seen variations of before. The high kicks were countered with boxing head movement that made him practically untouchable. The complex punching combinations were met with counterattacks that came from years of ring experience. When the tall black belt tried to trap him, in corners Alex used footwork that came from wrestling training to circle away and create new angles. But this time, Alex wasn't holding back like he had during regular class. He could see the intention behind every strike, feel the aggression that had nothing to do with learning or improvement. This wasn't training, this was an attempt to hurt him. So he responded appropriately. His counterattacks were precise and devastating. A perfectly timed uppercut that stopped just short of the tall black belt's chin. A leg sweep that dropped him to the floor without warning. A wrestling takedown that transitioned into a submission hold that the tall black belt had never seen before. Within 2 minutes, the tall black belt was flat on his back, breathing hard and looking up at Alex with complete shock. He'd thrown everything he had at someone he thought was a beginner, and he'd been completely outclassed. "My turn," the stocky black belt said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Jordan stepped forward to face him, and the dynamics were even more dramatic. The stocky black belt had always relied on his physical strength and aggressive style to intimidate opponents. Against most beginners, his approach worked perfectly. He'd overwhelm them with power and make them afraid to engage. But Jordan had been dealing with bigger, stronger opponents her entire life. Her gymnastics training had been with girls and boys who were often twice her size. Her parkour experience had taught her that size and strength meant nothing if you understood leverage and timing. Her wrestling background had shown her how to use an opponent's aggression against them. The stocky black belt's first attack was a powerful combination designed to back Jordan into a corner and end the fight quickly. Instead, she used his forward momentum against him, stepping slightly to the side and redirecting his energy with techniques that came from years of gymnastic floor exercises. His own power sent him stumbling past her, off balance and confused. Her counterattack was a thing of beauty. She used his confusion to get behind him, applied a wrestling hold that controlled his center of gravity, and took him down with a throw that looked effortless but required perfect timing and technique. Within seconds, he was on the ground with Jordan controlling his arm in a submission hold that would have impressed a Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor. How is this possible? He gasped, trying to understand how someone half his size had just dominated him completely. The girl black belt was the last one standing, and she was starting to realize that this wasn't going according to plan at all. She'd watched her two partners get outfought by opponents they'd thought were easy targets, and now it was her turn to face the music. But pride made her stubborn. She'd built her entire identity around being the best female fighter in the dojo, and she wasn't ready to admit that a 12-year-old could be better than her. "Let's see what you've really got," she said to Jordan, assuming a fighting stance that looked like she meant business. What followed was the most one-sided fight anyone in the dojo had ever seen. The girl black belt had technique and experience, but Jordan had something more fundamental: natural fighting ability that had been developed through years of diverse training. Every technique the girl black belt attempted was countered with something she'd never seen before. Her kicks were avoided with gymnastics flexibility that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Her punching combinations were answered with boxing counters that came from a different martial arts universe entirely. Her grappling attempts were met with wrestling techniques that made her years of karate training seem inadequate. The most humbling moment came when the girl black belt attempted her signature move, a complex spinning kick that had won her several tournament medals. Jordan didn't just avoid it. The Monday after the after-hours confrontation felt like walking into a completely different dojo. Word had spread through the martial arts community about what had happened, and everyone was looking at Alex, Jordan, and the three black belts with new eyes. The atmosphere was thick with curiosity, respect, and more than a little awkwardness. Mr. Chen called everyone to sit in a circle before class started, something he only did when there were serious issues to address. His face was calm but serious as he looked around at all the students, from the newest white belts to the most experienced fighters. "We need to talk about what happened Friday night," he began. "Not to embarrass anyone or assign blame, but because this situation has taught us all some important lessons about what martial arts really means." The three black belts sat with their heads down, still processing their complete defeat and the realization of how badly they'd behaved. They'd spent the weekend thinking about everything that had led up to that moment, and the picture wasn't pretty. "When Alex and Jordan first walked into our dojo," Mr. Chen continued, "they came here with respect, humility, and a genuine desire to learn. They had extensive backgrounds in other martial arts, but they put that aside to start fresh and learn our way of doing things. That's what real martial artists do." He paused and looked directly at the three black belts. "Unfortunately, some of our more experienced students saw them as a threat instead of an opportunity. They let their egos and insecurities turn them into bullies instead of teachers." The silence was heavy, but it wasn't judgmental. Everyone in the dojo had been part of what happened, either by participating in the intimidation or by standing by and watching it happen. "But here's what really impressed me," Mr. Chen said, his voice getting warmer. "When Alex and Jordan finally showed their true abilities, they could have humiliated their tormentors. They could have made them look foolish in front of everyone. Instead, they showed restraint, respect, and genuine concern for their opponents' well-being." Alex and Jordan shifted uncomfortably, not used to being the center of positive attention. They'd been focused on just surviving the hostile environment, not on impressing anyone. "That," Mr. Chen said firmly, "is what martial arts mastery actually looks like. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest or the most technically perfect. It's about having the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy. It's about being strong enough to help others instead of hurting them." The tall black belt finally raised his head. "Sensei, we messed up badly. We let our pride turn us into exactly the kind of people martial arts is supposed to protect against. How do we fix this?" Mr. Chen smiled for the first time since the conversation started. "That's the right question. And the answer is that you start by understanding what you did wrong and why it happened." Over the next hour, the entire dojo had the most honest conversation about martial arts, bullying, and community that many of them had ever experienced. The three black belts admitted that they'd felt threatened by Alex and Jordan's natural abilities, and had responded by trying to drive them away instead of welcoming them. "We worked so hard to get our black belts," the girl explained, her voice shaky with emotion. When you two showed up and picked things up so fast, it made us feel like maybe we weren't as special as we thought we were." The stocky black belt nodded. We'd gotten used to being the top students, the ones everyone looked up to. Having beginners who were naturally better at some things made us feel insecure about our own skills. Alex and Jordan listened to these confessions with growing understanding. They'd been so focused on their own struggles that they hadn't really thought about how their presence might affect other students. "We never wanted to make anyone feel bad," Jordan said quietly. "We just wanted to learn karate the right way, from the beginning." "That's exactly why what you did was so impressive," Mr. Chen replied. "You had the humility to start over, even though you already had advanced skills. Most people with your abilities would have demanded special treatment, or tried to skip ahead." The conversation shifted to what needed to happen next. Mr. Chen had some ideas that surprised everyone. "Alex and Jordan, I'm recommending you both for accelerated advancement. Your skills and knowledge are far beyond white belt level, and it's time your rank reflected your abilities. I'm scheduling you for brown belt testing in 3 months." The gasps around the room were audible. Going from white belt to brown belt was almost unheard of, usually taking years of dedicated training. But everyone who'd witnessed their abilities knew they deserved it. "But more importantly," Mr. Chen continued, "I want you to start helping teach some of our classes. Your diverse martial arts background gives you perspectives that could benefit all our students." Then he turned to the 3 black belts with an offer that shocked them even more. "I want you 3 to be their training partners and assistants. You have traditional karate knowledge they need, and they have practical fighting experience you could learn from. This could be an opportunity for all of you to grow in ways you never expected." The idea of the former bullies becoming training partners with their victims seemed impossible at first. The hurt and mistrust were still too fresh. The memories of weeks of intimidation too recent. But something interesting happened over the following weeks. Working together on techniques and training drills forced all 5 teenagers to see each other as real people, instead of obstacles or threats. The tall black belt discovered that Alex's boxing background could actually improve his traditional karate punching. Instead of throwing rigid linear punches, he learned to add hip rotation and footwork that made his techniques more powerful and natural. The stocky black belt found that Jordan's gymnastics training could help him with flexibility and body awareness he'd never developed. Her ability to move fluidly between standing and ground positions opened up new possibilities for his own fighting style. The girl black belt was amazed by how much Jordan's wrestling knowledge could improve her grappling game. She'd always been strong, but Jordan taught her how to use leverage and timing to overcome opponents who were bigger and stronger. In return, Alex and Jordan finally got the traditional karate instruction they'd been seeking from the beginning. The 3 black belts had years of experience with proper form, breathing techniques, and the philosophical aspects of martial arts that couldn't be learned from YouTube videos or casual training. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. There were still moments of tension, still times when old habits and hurt feelings surfaced. But gradually, respect began to replace hostility, and cooperation began to replace competition. The real test came 3 months later at the brown belt examination. Alex and Jordan had to demonstrate not just their fighting abilities, but their understanding of karate principles, their ability to teach others, and their commitment to the martial arts community. They passed with flying colors, but the most touching moment came when the 3 former black belt bullies stood up and applauded, genuinely proud of their former victims' success. 6 months after that, something even more remarkable happened. The dojo started attracting students from other martial arts backgrounds who'd heard about the welcoming, innovative training environment. Kids with wrestling experience, boxing backgrounds, and even dance training began showing up, knowing they'd be accepted and encouraged to share their knowledge. The dojo became known throughout the region for its inclusive atmosphere and cross-training approach. Students learned traditional karate, but they also got exposure to boxing, wrestling, gymnastics, and other martial arts through visiting instructors and advanced students. Alex and Jordan eventually earned their black belts and began teaching their own classes. Their students learned not just fighting techniques, but lessons about humility, perseverance, and the importance of lifting others up, instead of tearing them down. The three former bullies became some of the dojo's most dedicated instructors, using their own experiences to recognize and prevent the kind of intimidation they'd once practiced. They developed a special program for helping new students feel welcome and supported, no matter what their background or skill level. Years later, when people asked about the secret to the dojo's success, Mr. Chen would always tell the same story. He'd talk about two kids who came in wanting to learn, faced adversity with grace, and showed everyone what real strength looked like. He'd explain how their example transformed not just their tormentors, but the entire martial arts community. The story became legendary in martial arts circles, not because of the fighting or the dramatic confrontations, but because it showed how martial arts training could transform people's hearts and minds. It proved that the real victory wasn't about who could fight the best, but about who could choose compassion over revenge and build bridges instead of walls. Alex and Jordan never forgot those early weeks of intimidation and struggle. But they also never forgot the lesson they learned about the power of perseverance and the importance of treating others with dignity, even when they don't deserve it. Their story became proof that real martial arts mastery isn't about defeating enemies. It's about turning enemies into friends,